Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Rapping with the Rep. I'm State Representative Ken Gordon, and we're going to have a special show today. We're here with Phil Gallagher, former moderator, former selectman, and we're here with current selectman Mike Runyan. We're going to talk about Virginia Mooney and have a tribute and some memories of this wonderful Burlington institution. I knew Virginia from the time that I ran for state rep. She ran for state rep too, and we ran against each other in the primary. She was a wonderful person. For me, it was the first election I ever ran in myself, and I didn't have an impression of how that would go to be competitive in a small town, or in my case, it was a district of 2 towns and a precinct. And she was a wonderful person from the start, and I really enjoyed meeting her then and knowing her for the last 6 years. She brought a lot to the community, but the two of you have really had a lot of involvement with her over a much longer period. So I really want to turn the floor or the camera over to you and share some of your memories and impressions of Virginia Mooney.
Well, I went to school with her daughter in elementary school, so, you know, and it's been a while since I've been in elementary school. But I first really became aware of her, I think, in the Charter Committee in '69. She was involved in that, a supporter of their recommendations, which was representative town meeting and town administrator, and she was an ardent supporter of that concept, and subsequently was elected to town meeting. And then shortly thereafter, there was the high school controversy, which, you know, she was in opposition to this school, which in retrospect she was probably right, because
a couple things.
It was too big when it was built, and it's a Soviet era example of architecture.
Right.
If you've gone by it, as you have since you're here. So she really had actually, from municipal historical standpoint, Virginia Mooney was probably one of the more consequential figures of the last 40 years of the century. She was involved in so many issues. She had her hand in everything.
Yes, for those of you who are unaware, she did pass away recently, and she will really be missed here in Burlington. She was an institution within town government, and she was an institution in so many organizations, such as the BCAT Board right here, which she served right until the end.
Right.
Mike?
Yeah, Ken, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to the program. I was out of state, and I missed the services, Virginia, and so I appreciate this opportunity to share some of my recollections of Virginia with you.
Absolutely.
I know I first met Virginia back in the late 70s. My sister-in-law was playing in this girls' softball league here in town, and Virginia was a player and a coach back then, and for many years before and after. I've served with Virginia. I spent a dozen years with her on town meeting, over 20 years with her on the Housing Partnership Committee, which was one of her. She was really passionate about affordable housing opportunities here in Burlington for the seniors.
She was.
Served, you mentioned BCAT Board of Directors. I had the privilege of spending a few years here on that board with Virginia as well. I had a couple of campaigins
Against her.
against Virginia.
Three exactly, as I recall.
Actually, I think she missed one. She was ill one year, but of the 3 campaigns, she was there for a couple of them, and I have to say, she always ran a very good campaign. She stuck to the issue. She never got down in the weeds. She focused on her issues and her issues alone, and so it was. And she was always very polite to me and courteous, and it was actually an enjoyable campaign.
I think she really appreciated and understood the democratic process of volunteer involvement with the town.
Well, she gets on town meeting, I think, in '71, and then in '75, Bob Gordon, who was the, rest in peace, Bob, who was the moderator at the time, put her on the Ways and Means Committee. So that was also her first of 41 runs for the Board of Selectmen in 1975. I think she ran against Howie Strahan at the time, and Howie was a local football legend, etc. So she didn't have much luck in that race. But she continued on, and then it was Well, she was very involved, for instance, and if we go back in history, this was a very important time in Burlington's history. You know, in the 60s, from 60 to 70, we really started to accelerate. But from 70 on, it was you know, a huge boom town, and all of the things, the pertinent things that come along with a boom town were infrastructure issues and that sort of thing. So she was involved, not always the leader, but you know, she would pick up other people's issues that she thought were of consequence. One I can think right off the top of my head was Ann Rowe, Margaret Vaccaro, Millie Nash, Mabel Nevins were all at that time very incited about the water quality, that we had a problem in town. And you know, Virginia took that on as a campaign issue, and it turns out they were right.
Right.
You know, we had enormous problems, you know, at the sewer cave-in in Northwest Park, at the South Side. So also during this period of time, although she may not have been winning, she was bringing up the issues in the setting of the campaign. Here at BCAT, and prior to that at Greater Boston Cablevision, we were conducting regular interviews and debates with the candidates for the various offices. So Virginia was always bringing up these issues. She was bringing up the moratorium issue. She was bringing up the sewer issue. She was bringing up the water issue. And they all were center stage at that time. I mean, we lost 50% of our production when we lost the well fields. And on the sewer issue, we had pressurized sewer geysers coming up out of the manholes throughout the town and down into Woburn. And when that line got pressurized, in order for us to relieve the pressure on Woburn, we were dumping raw sewage right into the Vine Brook, which anecdotally was upstream of where we were drawing water from the mill pond. So although she was unsuccessful during that 13-year period from 75 to 88, she was constantly in the mix, either for or against various issues. And unfortunately, during that period of time, I think she got kind of a reputation as an auntie. She used to refer to me as part of the good old boy network, you know, which we'll talk about when she became a good old boy later on.
When she won.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Phil. Yeah, even though she wasn't successful in the majority of those campaigns, she did bring those issues to the forefront during those campaigns. And exactly right, you hit on all of the ones that are really important, and particularly the water issue. Always concerned about this development is going to have an impact on our water, and lo and behold, here we are today looking to make a huge investment into MWRA. So, yeah, there's a lot of insight.
Certainly ahead of our time, as was Margaret, as was Ann Rowe, on that issue, demanding that something be done. Because, you know, naturally the Board of Selectmen is always chasing revenue. So the boards and the planning board, you know, we're building and building and building, and we were way ahead of ourselves. But you know, I referenced her, you know, criticizing various members of the establishment as the good old boy network. In 1988, she got elected.
Right.
She got elected for a 3-year term on the Board of Selectmen. And the interesting thing is based on her performance, not necessarily her leadership, that she wasn't you know, always the king on various issues, but she was supportive of these various issues. And those were reflected in her votes on the Board of Selectmen. And having served with her for 3 years, on the basis of her votes and the things that she supported, Virginia should have really won a second term. But her campaigns were kind of iconic in a sense that she never developed a coalition of other people. I didn't know her anything. You know, she never stood on the picket line or the voting line. Mike didn't know her anything. She never handed out literature for anybody. She never did any of the things to elect somebody else because she was always the candidate.
Right,
you know?
right. Well, she stood independent as well, right?
Well, she was independent, you know, local politics are nonpartisan, but
Right.
she was.
Yeah, I mean it with a small eye.
Yeah,
Right?
she was a Democrat.
Right.
She
Oh,
was
yeah.
a Democrat through thick and thin.
Oh, she was, and she was committed. She was
Oh.
a member of the town Democratic Committee, and she went
Right.
to the state convention. And from my point of view, she ran against me in the Democratic primary, But as soon as the primary was over, she had her lawn sign up, and from year to year, the next few campaigns, before we ever put lawn signs up, I would get a call. Somebody's got a lawn sign up to support you, and oh, we haven't done it yet. It was Virginia Mooney.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. That's what I mean. She was.
In the partisan races, yes, yes, yeah.
But she was. She was. You know, although she didn't have that coalition as you speak of, but she did. You know, she'd get out there and she would you know, do her thing to the best of her ability, and again, like I said, she she stuck to the issues, didn't get off track at all, and always ran a very good campaign. And yeah.
She was an advocate for many things. You know, we don't have a military record, which we'll have to talk to Bob Hogan. But she was an advocate certainly for the DAV. She was, I think, the president or the commander of the auxiliary. She served in World War II, as did John, her husband.
Right.
A lot of us used to laugh that John must be a saint to put up with it.
Right.
But, you know, she gets on in '88, so, you know, some of the things that she's voting on, I mean, this is just, and were passed or were settled in some manner. The landlocked land, which was a huge issue, she was an advocate of that. The acquisition of the Cementor property, in which we put the Pine Haven Cemetery. The center school reconstruction was important because she was an advocate for the COA. The COA had always been in the cellar of the Union School, which is now the police station, that old, you know, 120-year-old edifice.
Right.
And she was instrumental in, you know, forcing the board to, you know, make more space available for the COA up at the center school.
Change their seniors' lives because they have a place to go.
They
and
have
be
the place
together.
to go, yeah. And just to give you an idea, in 1969, we spent $2,000 on the COA. That was
Wow.
the entire
Those
COA
days,
budget. Oh, but wait a minute. It also included $100 in transportation expense. So, you know, large yes for the COA. But she was in that settlement. She was in the Northwest Park settlement, which was an $8.2 million settlement, which resulted in the Vinebrook water treatment plant. So she was, you know, she was a positive vote for that. She voted for the I&I program, which reduced inflow and infiltration into a sewer system to try and relieve that problem. So there were pavement management was another one. So she was the PRP settlement too on the south side. As you recall, we were trying to determine where the pollution was coming from. Oh, and we determined obviously when the sewer collapsed that it was Northwest Park, but it was much broader than that because the many monitoring wells that we were drilling were finding more and more levels of trichlorofluoroethane. And then we found that that was coming down from the south side, from the top of the hill where high voltage was. Bruce Silverman had negotiated a deal, the largest real estate deal in the history of the town, selling the high voltage site. Well, on Christmas Eve, they went in and they did one last drill on the property because remember we had what's the 21E legislation.
Right.
So they couldn't pass unless, you know, all of that. So they drill a hole in the center of the what's the name of that place? High voltage. And what they come up with is pure product. Not water. I mean, pure product. And what had happened was they had a huge degreasing pit in the center of that building. And they were draining that degreaser into the sanitary sewer system. Well, as a result of frost heaves and shifting of the building, etc., the drainage pit and the exit pipe were separated. So it was going directly into the groundwater. So, you know, that was another huge settlement that the town got as a result of some of
How was
those
Virginia
efforts.
involved with that settlement?
Well, Virginia was on the board. Jack Leahy and I were the subcommittee for the negotiations. So, you know, there was a variety of things. Recommendations were coming back. Should we do this? So there were a number of different votes. We had to go down to Washington to meet with the FDIC because they eventually took ownership of the property. So, I mean, it was a gigantic problem. And subsequently, the settlement involves a treatment plant that's right on that site, which is funded by the owners and the settlement. So these were, these were enormous consequential issues that she was involved in. The Ice Palace we acquired, which has been, as you know, I mean, that's been an enormous success from
Very
your
popular.
standpoint.
Mhm.
Yeah. So not only was she bringing issues to the fore, but now she becomes one of the good old boys, because rather than being an auntie on the board, she realizes, municipal government, when you hold the seat, you've got to make hard decisions and make those votes.
Right, responsibility that comes with it.
Yeah, so we very rarely, when she was on the board, we very rarely had 4-1 votes in which Virginia took an anti-position against what the board was trying to accomplish in those areas.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. It's you have a completely different perspective once you gain elective office, rather than being perhaps maybe a town meeting member or just a resident in general. It's easy to say, why'd you do this, why'd you do that? But yeah, once you have that responsibility, and Virginia did, like you accurately pointed out, you sort of have to, you might have shift gears a little bit. Your thinking changes just a little bit. But
sometimes you have so much more information than someone else may have.
Well, that's another thing.
And you need to draw from that.
Yeah. Yeah, she also had a pretty sharp pencil too. Despite
She had a sharp tongue too.
She could. I remember here at BCAT, we were, Jim was for a number of years trying to replace that old BCAT van that we had here, and poor Dick Linder was trying to constantly retrofit it to keep up with the technology. And but Virginia was, it still runs. It's only got so many miles. We can still get another year or two out of it. But ultimately, eventually they got the new van. But yeah, she could dig in on spending. She was concerned about spending. But if it was, again, if it had something to do with our seniors or our water, she was all in. She was all in.
Well, she was very consequential here, as you know, in that she came on, I think we signed the contract in '87, which established BCAT, which was essentially just a one-horse, one-pony show. Rich Wadman, I think, was the first director. But all during the time that Virginia's running, she's raising awareness and trying to get the vote out, et cetera, trying to get people more and more involved in the political issues. And she backed up that not only by campaigning, but by her efforts here. As you yourself know, you've seen the decline in the community newspaper business, decline. We used to have 3 full-time editors and 9 stringers, and, nobody's buying papers anymore.
Yep.
During that time, Virginia's recognizing the impact that local cable is going to have on the electorate in a couple of different ways. First of all, exposure to children and education and whatnot, the things that are going on in town. But then also from the political spectrum and the issue spectrum, because she had, I think, 230, 250 different programs, Our Town, Say It Like It Is, in which she was bringing on local guests who may have a political interest or may have a different political point of view. And once again, she was doing her best to expose that to the community, and I think she did a real good job on that. She was actually awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award from BCAT in 2016.
She was. And if we could take a moment to talk about how important BCAT has become to this community for the very reasons you're pointing out, along with the programming that's available to the residents to come in and produce programming and offer the culture of the town to everyone else. It also gives an opportunity for people who might not be able to watch town meeting, to watch town meeting live, as it's happening in real time. And through Rich Hosford and the news division and yourself, Phil, to be able to provide information that right now would otherwise be very hard to get. And it's a very reliable source of information.
Well, Mike was on as it expanded, and it permeated more and more aspects of the community. It was political talk, and it was a cooking show, and it was then it began to involve in the religious programming. And I think now we have, 22, 23 churches in town. I'm not even sure the number. But yes, it's grown to the point where, as a outreach program, we're looking to engage as many parts of the community in as many endeavors as possible. And you can see that. I mean, we've got the the gardening show was on, the BACC from the business community is on, your show is on, and so many more. We have the video voyages that are doing the middle school, and then we have the older kids that are doing the high school events. And gradually, we started with the Board of Selectmen, which was about 1988. But now gradually, every single board of major import is on is televised live.
Right.
I think the only ones that are left are maybe Capital Budget and the Recreation Commission. But everybody else is on. Planning Board is on. School Committee is on. Ways and Means is on. Who else is on? You guys are on.
Well, we're there, yeah.
Right, I have colleagues from the State House come in on this show, and afterwards they talk about what BCAT does, and so we don't have this in our community. But the cable access is available in other communities, but not to the extent that Burlington has been able to use it and become a tremendous resource.
Well, it was set up originally in the right way. It was set up according to the state legislation at the time. So the funding source was contracted already.
Right.
And then the bylaws was set up, and it was set up not as a division of the town because it would have been enormously more expensive were it to be a town department. So it was set up as a 501c3 with a dedicated funding source, which came from the user fee.
The cable company.
The cable company. Yep. And then it was set up with an independent board of directors with audit responsibility back to the executive, to the Board of Selectmen. So there was transparency, there was accountability, there was a funding source, and then there was a community need that was gradually and continually being met.
And so what was required now was a board of local people to come in with enough interest and commitment to see it through. And Virginia took one of those positions and worked hard at it right through her life.
Yeah, she was here 26 years, Mike.
A long time.
How long has it been since you've been on the board?
Oh goodness. Well, I'm no longer on the board with BCAT.
No. How long has it been since you were on the board of BCAT?
Oh, I think it's been
years,
almost. Yeah, I did almost 5 or 6 here, and then but it's been 8 or 9 since I left. But it was during that period, exactly right. Virginia would champion for the expansion of coverage of the government meetings. She was a advocate of that. She thought it was good for the community, which it absolutely is. And we just watched the BCAT just grow and grow and grow. You know, I've been to other local cable studios and really can't hold a candle to what we have here in Burlington, and certainly Virginia's a Carwan, Arlene DeRocco, all part of that group that.
Ernie DiMartinez originally.
Right off the top, yeah. We had a good group guiding, of course, Jen.
Yeah.
Couldn't do it without
well,
Jen,
there's been
too.
a lot of transition, too, because we've added providers, so now we're on 9 different channels, HD and the regular programming. To take up the slack in the community reporting on the political and social issues, 2 years ago, I think now, Rich Hosford came on as the news director. So much like the old newspaper daily, Rich is reporting out with a newsletter that comes out with stories that are current,
They are.
what's happening today. So that's expanded, and she was on for those decisions. She was also on for the reach out into the social media. For instance, a website came up, Facebook came up. We're live streaming now government, not only on the channel, but you can go on to Facebook and you can get live streaming of government channels wherever you are in the country.
That's right.
So I mean, for a community of 26,000 to be able to be broadcasting all of their content across wherever you have internet access. I mean, we're a global network now.
That's right. But you think of it, I mean, that board of directors, the age group, were not exactly IT savvy at the time, but kind of really remarkable if you think about it that she was part of that group to help bring that technology to the residents of Burlington.
And I really want to take a moment to remind our viewers that you should really look at the website, the BCAT website, and subscribe to that newsletter because, as you said, Phil, that is such an important source of information that comes in every morning.
Yeah.
And Rich works hard at it, but it's so reliable and so effective.
And there's still more things to be done. I mean, she was an advocate for greater, again, outreach. And there are more things that can be done with the cable network, with the town's intranet. For instance, you know, from a security standpoint, we could be, you know, live feeding to the police station, security cameras across the entire width of the town if they chose to do that. You could do it inside the buildings, town hall or in the schools. I mean, these all have other social issues, you know, and Second Amendment issues, et cetera, but those are the things that still are off into the future that the system can provide. So, you know, she was along from that from the time that it was a one-person operation with a couple of cameras being toted around to now what, you know, it's a $500,000 budget and I think six full-time employees and a part-time engineer.
Yeah. Mike, you run the together with Terry the 4th of July parade.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I
Terry
wanted to
Tarpey.
get that in. I know you're getting
Yeah.
short on time, but I had a cute story that I wanted to share with the folks at home. A couple of years ago, we had chosen Virginia and her husband John as our grand marshals for the 4th of July parade. It's sort of a grand marshal, outstanding citizen type of thing. And when Terry called the house, she got John on the phone, and she explained to John that, listen, the 4th of July committee would like you and Virginia to be our grand marshal in the parade this year. And John went, well, no, thank you, but you know, I don't think it's something we want to do. So we hung up the phone, and Virginia says, John, who was that? Oh, that was Terry Tarpey from Town Hall. What did she want? Well, she wanted us to be on. You call her right back right now. You tell her we'll do it.
Virginia knew exposure when she saw it. Yeah.
Terry might have been a little surprised.
It was, I tell you, I couldn't have been more honored to be part of that committee to, you know, make that appointment as Grand Marshal. I was just thrilled to do it, and they were just so gracious to accept and ride in a parade. Of course, it's not everybody's cup of tea to ride down Main Street in a convertible, but they did it, and they were both perfect candidates for that honor.
I mean, they came to the breakfast. They spoke to some of the other veterans there and other town residents, and they really seemed to enjoy themselves then and then in the parade.
Yeah.
I would only have one last comment in that, you know, for some years from the establishment, she was kind of a source of derision, and that, you know, she was always an auntie and she never wins, and et cetera, et cetera. But I think her legacy should not be that she ran 41 times and lost for the Board of Selectmen. Okay, I think her legacy should be what she said was a lady that never gives up. And all during those periods of time that she was running, she was bringing forth consequential issues to the community. Whether she was for something or against something is irrelevant. What is relevant is the fact that she was working on these things at all times across a wide spectrum of the community. Yeah, education, veterans issues, community cable issues, the minibus, that was another thing she was a big advocate of. So I think her legacy should be that she was a tireless worker for the benefit of the community.
She really cared. Yeah. Mike?
She did. I would agree with Phil. I think he said it very well. I echo what Phil says. And you know, it was never about Virginia. I mean, her motivations were always the community. It was not at all about her desire to hold that position. It was you know, her intentions were always with the community in mind every single time. There's no question in my mind. Yeah.
She always wanted to be the first woman on the Board of Selectmen. Well, Anne Marie Baden had beaten her to the punch and won that position. But when Virginia got elected, it was the only time in Burlington's history that we had 2 women on the Board of Selectmen at the same time.
Well, that's an accomplishment for
So
her.
she wasn't first, but she was second, and that was good enough for her.
She certainly made that difference, and she cared about the community, and the community knew that, and we're always appreciative of that. Guys, thank you very much for coming and sharing your thoughts about Virginia Mooney here on Rapping with the Rep. I'm State Representative Ken Gordon. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next time.
Thanks for having us.